Answering the question of why your dog is doing this is going to help you in the future avoid putting them in situations that perpetuate this problem and continue to add to it. Living in such close proximity with dogs who are restrained all the time and frustrated and therefore vocalizing causes most of the problems that we associate with that bad reactive behavior. Barriers that we have in our normal life, barriers like leashes, fences, cars, anything that's restraining the dog causes frustration. Even in dogs that are not reactive, it tends to cause things like barking and vocalizing because they can't experience something. Just like with people, you have some people who are really thick-skinned and don't really care about too much, like a Labrador, think of. And then you have our border collies who everything kind of affects them a lot. So something that might not bother a Labrador or a Golden Retriever is potentially going to cause a lot of problems with your herding breeds. So passing all of these situations all of the time, dogs barking at the fence and that sort of thing, educates your dog on how to act in a way that we don't like. So imagine if you're going for your walk in your local neighborhood and regularly you have 2 to 5 people who scream obscenities at you from their house. Maybe some of them even run down the driveway at you, and still others on occasion run all the way across the street and chest bump you. How would that make you feel? Would you start having anxiety around these certain houses, these certain areas where you've experienced that? You might actually even start to generalize it as a whole to anybody. Or maybe you start really noticing if somebody's staring at you and knowing that that stare is often a precursor for barking or charging. Now you start to get anxiety when you see a person staring at you. We routinely put our dogs in these situations, not understanding how badly it affects them. We often think it's somewhat natural. Well, dogs bark, right? That's normal. Dogs are being dogs. I've heard that one more than a few times, and nothing could be farther from the truth. So, a normal animal does not charge up to other animals unless it really wants to fight. So this is not something that you see in nature. You don't see wolves running across to other wolf packs and starting fights, because that could potentially mean their death. So they have more self-control than our dogs today, and that's all goes back to that being restrained. Anytime you restrain and hold a dog back, they don't themselves then have any sort of self-control. They are just acting on whatever hits them, whatever comes to their mind, they're reacting because they're always held back and they're always prevented from that experience. In nature, one does not encounter so many enemies and be totally unable to run away or avoid the situation. The cost of putting our dogs in these situations is even higher when that dog is young. When you have a puppy, they are absorbing everything, and even though the effects are not right away seen, you don't typically see, even a 6-month-old or even a 7-8-month-old, you don't typically see the effects of experiences they had when they were 2 or 3 months old until they're more confident to act on that. So when they're young, their instinct is maybe just to avoid, hide you, get behind you. But as they get older, they have a more defensive instinct, so they're ready to protect themselves, and they start triggering on things earlier and earlier. So like I said before, maybe at first they were only triggering on dogs barking, but as they are more and more able to predict when that's happening, they're looking at dogs. Oh, is that dog staring at me? So as a professional dog trainer, when we go into these situations, it's often hard to elicit reactions with some dogs using our dogs because our dogs are trained to be very neutral. They're not allowed to stare at other dogs, posture at other dogs, fly to the end of the leash. So our dogs are taught from a very young age to be neutral, to walk by, to ignore, and not focus in. And that is what helps the other dog. Imagine you're walking down the street and you have two people, one here and one there. This one is minding his own business. He's not even looking at you. This one is staring at you as you approach. Which person would you prefer to pass? Staring is aggressive, and we recognize those precursors to aggression, and naturally we're going to want to go to the person who ignores us or walk by the person who ignores us. That's normal, but we don't tend to think that way when it comes to dogs. So if you're out and about and you see a dog staring and posturing, think about it for yourself. If that was a person and they were looking at me in the same way, would I feel comfortable? And typically the answer is no. That's the natural answer, and that is universal across most mammals. Staring is an act of aggression. As you start to fix these problems, or if you're watching and you have a young dog, it's so important that you try to avoid these situations because it undoes all the work you've put in. The fact is, however, those situations do come up. You may be forced to pass another dog that's a bad example to your dog, and that's going to elicit feelings of fear from them. The best thing you can do is try to interact with your dog in a way that takes the focus off of the aggressive behavior that's being shown and onto the game or the fun that you're having. Let's just say, for example, you have your little 6-year-old all bright-eyed and impressionable, and now you have to pass a situation where you have adults screaming out the windows or rushing in the fenced area, or doing something that your child is going to be scared of, maybe lighting off firecrackers. So that situation, think of how you would communicate to your child that he's safe or she's safe. One really good way to do it is to show your child or your dog that the situation isn't as serious as they thought. Using that social learning that mammals understand, you can, with your own body language and with your own actions, show your dog, hey, there's nothing to be worried about. So if I had a little 6-year-old kid, I might bring his toy with me, and I might like, hey, pass me the ball, hurry, quick, throw it, yeah, touchdown, woohoo. All of that, as ridiculous as it sounds, is going to help him go, oh, okay, that's really stressful, naturally. But mom here is playing and apparently totally oblivious to this, so it must be safe. And that's essentially what you need to do with your dog in that situation. Create as much distance as you can. It might be grabbing a stick and throwing it for them if they're on a leash, but letting them go chase it. It might be running away. It might be doing a spin with a treat. It might be just really praising them and kind of moving by quickly. But the last thing you want to do is make your dog sit and now hyper-focus on the threat, because it's an intuitively scary thing. So there's nothing you're going to do to fix your dog into accepting inherently scary things, no more than you or I would want to do it. So the only thing you can do in that situation is try to reinvent what the situation is and not let it affect your dog and take you kind of into the negative category. So what kind of situations are we talking about that might have a negative impact on your dog and poorly conditioned condition them to what another dog means. One situation that I really hate, because I always have big dogs and I'm obsessed with making them very safe with small breeds, is the stereotypical owner with two Maltese on a flexi. And that owner sees nothing wrong with letting their two dogs fly 25 feet at mine and stop within 6 inches of me, barking and going bananas. And they're like, ha ha ha. They don't understand that in that moment, my dog sees two little dogs being aggressive and goes, mental note, little dogs suck. Avoid the situation of the dog that's able to come right up against the sidewalk. So some fences come right up against the sidewalk. That means your dog's going to be in close proximity to the dog who's lunging and flying at the fence. And lastly, and sometimes we don't think about this and how it can be scary, avoid the neighbor with the friendly Labrador who lets them charge as fast as they can up to you. Particularly when you have a puppy, it doesn't matter, again, if there's blood. It doesn't matter what their intentions are. A dog can do damage to another dog mentally without ever putting a tooth through them. So just, again, like yourself, if you're walking down the street and something charges you, that's an act of aggression, and we are innately programmed to feel that way about it. Every single dog has a different threshold for what they can experience. So you're going to have certain dogs that are not as bothered by things, and you're going to have other dogs that are hypersensitive to this kind of stuff and very easily affected by it. You don't need to know exactly what type of dog you have, especially if you have a puppy and you're not sure. The safest thing is to just avoid those situations completely and make sure that all interactions with your dog are calm, relaxed, not where your dog's feeling uncomfortable and trying to hide under the table because it's too much for them. It doesn't matter, again, if the dog has good intentions or not good intentions. What matters is how your dog perceives it.